thoughts?
Good afternoon. Hey, welcome back to the Collision Hub World's Fair. This afternoon, we're going to talk again with Nick and Jake here about in-house calibrations. We keep seeing posts and getting questions on how do I get in the game of doing my in-house calibrations. And we had a great session this morning. I thought that was fantastic. I loved that experiment that we did. It was super cool. If you didn't catch the earlier show, be sure to tune in to the Facebook and YouTube pages and go watch a replay of that. We did some bumper repairs, some industry standard bumper repairs, and we really learned a lot of things. So go check that out if you weren't able to join us earlier. But again, this afternoon we want to talk about in-house calibration and some of the stuff that goes along with it. So like I said, I see posts about, hey, I want to get in the game. What do we need to do to start? I see all this money that can be made doing calibrations in-house. So I mean, it can't be that hard, right? What do I got to do to get in the game, Jake?
Well, you know, my personal opinion on that is that it's I don't think you're going to be all makes, all models.
Yep.
From a tooling expense perspective, it's just too expensive today to try to do it with factory tooling, factory targeting, factory scan tools to do every make, model, every system. Today it doesn't pencil. In my mind, it doesn't pencil from an ROI perspective. So, you know, I tell shops that don't let that be an impulsive decision. Make that decision based on data. Make it on the vehicles that you work on.
Sure.
Okay, so it's kind of like which collision certification program do I want to join? You know, what aluminum repairs do I want to make? Make your calibration decisions the same way. Understand exactly the cars that you're working on, not a gut feeling. Look at your CCC indicator report. Look at your G-map if your paint supplier provides that, right? And understand what cars are registered around you, and then make your calibration decisions on that. I personally would start with one brand. Start with one brand, and if it's Nissan, start with Nissan. I look at Nissan as kind of in the middle. They're not the hardest, they're not the easiest. Sure. And so start with something that you can train your employees on, get a workflow around it, get really good at predicting when the calibration is required. That's where companies like ADAS Think can help, right? So I look at it, start with one brand and then add a brand to that.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to start somebody on a German. That's an advanced vehicle with a lot of stuff on it. Yep. And the tooling expense is higher.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm not a big fan of the calibration rigs that are one size fits all.
Yeah.
I think those are hard to defend. I think that there's different repair procedures around those cars, around those tools. So you've got to be careful. So, you know, this is another thing that, and for lack of a better term, calibration today, as we know it, is a moving target. They continue to evolve the tools, the processes. So I look at it from an expense standpoint. Don't just go jump in and buy whatever you see in a magazine. Do some research behind it, and you know, start with maybe a dealer where you're using a dealer, right? And how would you perform that in-house? How would you capture the photos, the documentation, all of the preparation steps? You can do that today without buying a piece of equipment.
Right.
Go and do that for a dealer and say, okay, let me know when you're going to pull it in the shop, and I'm going to be there so I can capture photos of your setup. Okay. Right? And that way you get an idea of the space, you get an idea of the floor, the lighting, all that kind of stuff. There's your loaded answer. I just think that it's something that, you know.
That's all good stuff. Let's reel it back and start from the beginning. So you mentioned the Nissan. Okay, so let's just say that, you know what, I'm in an area that, you know what, I work on a lot of Nissan vehicles, and maybe I'm in the network, maybe I'm not, regardless of that. But let's just start with Nissan, okay? So let's talk about, like, if I'm just going to start with one vehicle manufacturer, as you suggest, let's start with what do I need to know about Nissan? So let's talk about the technician, let's talk about the scan tool, let's talk about the targets, let's talk about, let's just start with space requirements. So what's the first thing I need to do if I'm just going to add Nissan to my portfolio?
Right. Well, you know, that's something I think Nissan North America was very proactive at. They recognize that, you know, our dealers may not be able to get these cars in a timely fashion. Our dealers may be far away. We need to have some kind of resource for our certified network, and that's why we built the class, right? So that we could send people through that class. And so, you know, we talk about. I'm a big fan of the floor being a neutral color that you can write on. From a documentation perspective, that is very valuable. The Nissans want you to record ride height, so ride height on the vehicles, and that will change depending on what you're working on. So the Pro 4X Titan is the off-roady version and has a different height variance compared to an SL or an SV,
So
which
it's a
may
good
be
place,
lower.
it's a good place to keep notes right on the floor?
Yeah, right on the
Okay.
floor, because you can capture it in a photo. I can also capture where you took the measurement because you got the corner of the vehicle.
Okay.
You can also write your tire pressure on the floor. So as you move into 360 systems and things like that, you're going to have measurements that you want to write on the floor. So having a floor and a surface that you can write on, we're personally at Aztec working with a couple of different paint companies to define a product that will work for the shops that they could go and work through their existing paint manufacturer to get. Shout out, PPG and BASF and a couple of other different ones are working on that for us. So you should be able to procure that through your paint companies and apply that to the floors. And so
But before I even have a floor, I need a space, right? I got to have a roof.
Yep.
So what kind of a space requirement am I starting with? Before I even worry about the floor, what kind of a space am I even looking at? Can I turn my aluminum clean room into a
some people may
calibration
dual
center?
purpose that stuff, right?
Okay.
And maybe it's an area where you're not doing any repairs, but you're doing reassembly and disassembly.
Yep.
So if you may do some aluminum work in there, and if you have a calibration that you need to do, depending on what system it is, we recommend the shops have basically 1,800 to 2,200 square feet minimum.
Okay.
So that you can get a wide variety of vehicles and or systems.
Okay.
So there are some that are not as near as forgiving where you need more space. But once again, you're making that decision on the brand that you intend to calibrate in-house.
Okay.
So, and that's something that, I always tell people, regardless if it's diagnostics, if it's calibration, you are not in this alone.
Yeah.
If you need help, reach out to us here at Collision Hub, reach out to us at Aztec, ADAS Think. We will help you make that decision. In some cases, we may have people in the market that can fly to you and help you with that as well. So don't feel like you got to make that one alone.
It's overwhelming, you
It is.
know, and I mean, like, I know just enough to be dangerous, I think, when it comes to the ADAS and calibrations like that, but it's overwhelming. And again, I'm in always service information like every day, all day long, looking at stuff. And like, it still boggles my mind when I'm going through a 20-page document on just a simple alignment. So bullet point number one is 1,800 to 2,200 square feet.
At a minimum.
To be safe.
Yeah, to be
minimum.
safe, yeah.
Okay. Number two is going to be your floor. So there's number two. We got to make sure we got a nice floor. What about the other surrounding part of the walls, the ceiling, the lighting?
Lighting is not a fan. Lighting can cause you problems with certain brands. Toyota and Subaru in particular will call out lighting. Subaru wants a light.
What kind of lighting requirements?
Just to where you can control it, to where it's, in our calibration center, we actually have dimmer switches where you can bring it down, bring it up. We have blinds to cover windows so that you can block out natural light. So, you don't want this to be a carport on the back of your shop that you're trying to do this in. You want, please, if I'm missing something here, please help me. But I think the lighting thing is a big one.
It's huge, and the main thing is we don't want windows on your walls, and the light is coming in sideways.
The natural light,
we don't want light coming in sideways, coming into the camera, directly into the camera. We want, generally speaking, because it does depend on the OEM, but we want nice overhead lighting, and if you can control it, certainly all the better.
Toyota TIS actually gives you a couple of color cartoon examples.
Okay.
This is good, this is not good, and then this is good, right? So when you pull up a lane, pictograms are not bad things. Those OEMs listening out there, pictures are good things.
Yes, they are.
So Toyota does a really good job of that because their cars are sensitive to lighting as well. So you don't want to create an environmental failure for yourself. You can really pull your hair out thinking you have the wrong target, the target's in the wrong spot, the car, something wrong with the car, and then you find out it's your lighting, And so I've seen a couple of photos on their interweb there where people are putting a pup tent across the top of the car. They're covering it with an easy up. Please don't do that. Make sure you can control the lighting to a certain degree,
And lighting from the headlights as well can sometimes cause interference. If you're talking about a target, specifically camera-based calibrations, sometimes those lights can wash out that target, and so you need to be mindful of that. And maybe it's just a blanket that you put over the lights if you can't turn them off. But if you can turn them off, certainly.
Okay.
Yep.
There's all sorts of nuances. It's not as easy as kind of pushing a button and following some instructions. Once you go down that rabbit hole, there's all kinds of things that you have to be mindful of.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's why it's good to start with one manufacturer.
Right. And just when you think that you've got one manufacturer mastered, and like I said, we spent the summer building this Nissan class.
Yeah.
And there have historically been static vehicles, right? Then Nissan throws a little curveball at us with the new Rogue and the rear radar, which in previous vehicles you didn't have to do anything to them, calibration-wise. You had to make sure that the ground was correct on each side and some things like that, and install the module properly, but you didn't have a calibration work support process that you had to do. And on the Rogue, it became a dynamic calibrated side radar. Okay. And then they threw a 2-in-1 twin radar on the front. So completely different setup than everything else they sold. So to your point, it's overwhelming, even for guys like us that are in this every day. It's really tough to stay current, and I can't stress that enough. When you see a new make or a model come out, you need to dissect that thing. What did they change, you know? And our lab rat today is a perfect example. This is the last Nissan Sentra that did not have a secure gateway in it, so a secure network. So it has the ability, you can access this vehicle's entire network without having to go through a gateway process. And
okay, so let's just jump right to that. So we don't have a technician yet. Let's skip that, but we'll come back to the technician a little bit. But yeah, we've got our calibration center. We've got walls and lighting. We've got a floor. Secure gateway. What do I need to know about that? I mean, can I just get in there with any tool on the secure gateway?
It's one of those things that we first saw it. Actually, you know, the market kind of first saw it on the FCA vehicles. But I'll tell you, in 2009, Nissan actually did it with the GTR. So not a high production car, but required a physical security card to be inserted into the side of the factory console's tool before you could even access a GTR. And so that was a secure vehicle that required a manual credential.
Secure gateway.
Right, and now they're digital. So you're seeing in the 18 model FCA vehicles, they started rolling that out to where you had a secure gateway. So at Aztec, we actually saw that gateway in 2017, in April-ish of 2017, where we started seeing our first gateway vehicles. And we actually connected to 4,400 vehicles before the first aftermarket got access to that gateway. So it's a lot of cars, and it was nearly 2 years before the aftermarkets got access. And so you're seeing more of that. Currently, the Nissans have that gateway as well on the Sentra and the Rogue, and they don't have a aftermarket process to software-wise yet. They will, but that hasn't been released to the market yet. So, you know, in mechanical, it's not such a big concern outside of the dealer because you're dealing with an older vehicle, and you know what the concern is. You know what a customer complains about. Right? So as long as your tool has access, full access to the concern, not an issue, right? But in collision, car's brand new, and we need to see everything.
Well, you mentioned the aftermarket on the service side. I think they're not repairing these 19s yet.
No,
it's a 3-year-old vehicle to us in practicality. But
in some shops, that's a total loss immediately.
Right. The service side, they're not even touching this thing yet. This won't come in for another year or two, right?
Yes. So that's the concern. You know, and it's that there's some great aftermarket tools out there. There really are. But they were built for a business model where you know what the problem is. You know what the customer's complaining about. And so in collision, there's no two collisions alike. No. And so we have to see that car's full DNA. We have to know everything that's equipped. And so, you know, it kind of leads nicely into this particular car. So from a trim level perspective only, Nick, you ran ADAS Think on it?
That's right.
So what were our results as far as ADAS systems on this vehicle? How many did we have?
So we ran ADAS Sync on this vehicle, scanned the VIN barcode, and got back. It's really just two things. We got a forward collision mitigation. And whether or not you want to call it ADAS, it's got the rear camera in the back as well.
Right.
So this is the lowest trim level.
Driver assist, right? The backup cameras and assist.
It is, right? And there's some vehicles that may have a pattern for that where we have to do a calibration depending on what it is.
That's right.
And so that's really good that we identified there's two systems on this particular vehicle. However, when we go into the service manual, certain trim levels had blind spot option as well. Okay. And then when you step up a year, you can get 360 at the higher trim level too, the 360 camera system. So, you know, the trim level really could decide whether you're doing one calibration or three, right? Depending on what trim level you're working on. And so having the build data is really critical to knowing what you need proactively. So.
And when I did my ADAS Think version, the Jason version of it, I went inside the vehicle. I looked around the vehicle. I walked around the vehicle. I looked at the mirrors. I looked in the rear view. I looked at the rear bumper anyways. I looked in the dash without the vehicle on. I looked at all the engage, disengage buttons. I didn't see any buttons for this thing, so I thought, you know what? This car doesn't have any ADAS stuff on it. Lo and behold, we've got collision mitigation. Now, not collision braking, not automatic emergency braking, not adaptive cruise control, but it's got collision mitigation. So again, I think this is another area where, and again, we talked about in the first show, is knowing what the system is and how it's designed to work is paramount. Because as a collision repair technician, if I see that sensor in the front of the vehicle, I might automatically think, oh, it's got adaptive cruise control, or it's got, automatic emergency braking, and I'm going to approach that vehicle differently than if it just has collision mitigation, especially in my post-repair inspection process. If I'm trying to drive the vehicle on the road and I got the cruise control on it, it's not acting like an ACC system.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it doesn't have it. So it's really important, I think, to use multiple indicators to know, and that's relevant what ADAS Think is, give me what I got.
Well, Jason, I know we hear a ton of this where we think that people think that scan tools, even OE scan tools, are a magic wand for fixing the cars, and they're really not. So in this particular case, the ADAS control unit in the car, the nucleus, if you will, of the ADAS systems in this vehicle is still reporting. I can still see data. I've even got fault codes inside of it, but I'm not seeing a control module called laser radar. And laser radar is one that we would actually use to perform an a radar calibration on this vehicle. And if you look closely here, you can see that the front radar is missing completely. So as a result, it did not populate in the health check. And so if you don't know to go look for that module is called that, right? You could see, wow, if this thing still had a bumper on it, that might go missed, right, to where you couldn't see it. So
and it's fantastic to use those clues you mentioned. Look in the mirrors for a blind spot indicator. Look in the windshield for a camera, and take a look at the steering wheel and the buttons. But I think we're going to get it to a point relatively quickly where there's so many features that it's going to be very difficult to figure out what's on the vehicle just by looking at the steering wheel.
The trim level stuff is big because this car has optional blind spot monitoring, but because this is the OE tool, it knows that this vehicle's build data did not include blind spot monitoring, so it didn't even put it into the results of the scan. Okay, and so that's one of the big separators where all of a sudden you could have a phantom or a ghost code for a system that doesn't even exist based on its trim level. So
the other thing I think again with my inspection process that you can run into, and I think on some Stellantis vehicles, FCA, however you want to say, Jeep vehicles, I think there's like the cutoff for the camera was like on everything, even if it didn't have a camera. So just by looking at it, oh, it must have a camera.
Yeah.
Or I know like on some GM products, the head-up display, like all the dashes I think have the hole for the head-up display, but it doesn't mean
a little cover.
It doesn't mean it's got a head-up display. So there's visual indicators that might take me down the wrong road if I'm not. This one has
a blank spot where the blind spot indicator off button goes. So if a customer wants to turn it off, this one has a blank there that's nothing.
Cover there.
So that's where you're really seeing the trim levels, and really in the body shop world, that really only mattered to us if we were trying to figure out a headlight or maybe a bumper cover was different. I mean, they probably share fenders across all the trim levels, right? Doors, they share doors, but when you start talking diagnostics and wiring harnesses and switches and sensors, then it becomes a completely different deal.
And I think it's important that, generally speaking, you're calibrating the sensor and not the feature. And this is an area where, you can take a look at the Sentra, you take a look, I don't see any features unless you're pulling the build sheet using Aztec or ADAS Think. We see it again, it's either Ford or GM, where sometimes the cameras are up there and they're responsible only for emergency braking and not lane keep assist. And I've gotten a lot of questions, do I need to recalibrate the camera if there's no lane keeping? And it's like, no, I don't have to calibrate the camera, there's no lane keeping. Actually, that's wrong. It's the camera that you're calibrating or the radar that you're calibrating, not the feature.
So I'm gonna do my best to walk around here real quick and show you some other differences that we see. Sorry, guys. All right, so this is also an early generation ICC sensor on a Nissan. So if I'm going to put my pointer here, you can see there's a little adjustment knob here, and it looks very much like a headlight adjuster. Okay. So this radar's horizontal and the vertical axis is actually controlled manually. So you make those adjustments manually to this radar prior to a calibration. Where when you move to a newer style, it's a digital readout, so you can actually see it in the scan tool itself. So a little bit different setup, and this is also, you can see I had to smack this thing with a hammer to get it to.
This is not part of the alignment?
That's not part of the alignment, no. No, that was a Jake adjustment there. So I've actually seen this exact vehicle come through our Dallas Calibration Center where a shop used an aftermarket rebar that did not have the provisions for the radar bracket. So they drilled a hole and put a license plate grommet in there, And when we were coming up on the alignment machine, I could see this wiggling like all over the place. And I mean, I can't physically move this thing. It's very stiff. Okay. And so when we got the OE rebar, we found that there were nutserts welded into the back of it that were made for the ICC radar bracket. And so these are the little pitfalls that you could find that suddenly you're at the tail end of the repair. You might even made a customer phone call to pick up, and then you find a squirrel's nest here, and it becomes a mess. So, you know, I'll show you a little bit closer on this one here. You can see it's a little bit different size. This one's quite a bit smaller. On this vehicle, it's also exposed to the outside world, and it's off center, where on the newer cars, it's behind the emblem and you can't see it. So this vehicle, we would actually calibrate with the bumper off, so you'd have access to adjustment. And then on the newer cars, we have the bumper on it.
Okay.
And you know, Nissan's interesting, and kudos to them, because they've got their information on when to do a calibration when we're talking on the estimating side in the service manual. And they've also come out, I would say, fairly helpful position statements on certain ADAS sensors as well that repairers should be aware of for the front radar as well as the surround view monitoring system.
Yep.
And so if you're a repairer repairing Nissans or other manufacturers that have put out these kind of secondary documents, whether it's Nissan with their position statement or GM with their ADAS document or Honda and Acura, these are all documents you need to be aware of as well that may kind of broaden or narrow down those calibration requirements.
Another thing that we didn't mention, it sounds like a silly thing, but it becomes a problem until you actually start doing it, is on the 360 systems, we recommend that the shops have a bright colored piece of string. So like a pink or a yellow, something that is bright, because you're doing the bird's eye fine tuning. You use a combination of the scan tool and the radio in the vehicle, the screen in the vehicle. Okay. So you're sitting in the vehicle and you've got 32 angles of adjustment on those 360 cameras on the sides. So we're actually changing X and Y axis to turn them, and when we make adjustments with console, we apply it, and then you see the radio react. So if you can't see the string on the ground through the radio, it becomes a real headache. So making sure that you have a bright colored piece of string on a neutral colored floor, that way it shows up in your camera. I know that was...
Maybe okay, let's start with a different model, and a different make instead, okay? Let's
So, and this is not to pick on Nissan, I'm just saying that was the thing that we did that we found was helpful, was having something bright.
I think it's good though, because it's one vehicle, one example of one tip.
Yeah.
And you've probably got another 20 of them that you've learned doing the Nissan training.
Yeah.
And there's another 20 for Toyota and Honda and Ford. And again, that's the conversation I want to have today. Is
please don't
all the things that need to take place.
I'm not trying to scare the shops away from doing this. I believe 1,000% they can do this, but they have to focus on something maybe they're not comfortable with, and they have to learn a new skill, and that's okay. It's like, listen, we're going to show you, if you guys can run tape measures and you can be accurate with your lines and take good photographs, we can do this. This is extra time on an RO and extra time saved that you can do internally. But feel humble enough that you need to take the training, and
that's the key is have that humility to go like, you know what, and start small. Again, that's why I want to walk through with one vehicle maker. So we've got our building, our area for our calibrations now. We've got our lighting and everything's proper. We've got a secure gateway. Scan.
Understand the tooling.
Access. So what else? Let's. Well, you get your battery maintainer on there. So I mean, that's something we're going to need across the board for it. Do I need that to be a calibration center? Am I just using that for
need
scanning?
that to run? You need that to run diagnostics in general, because we don't want to. I actually, prior to us going to lunch, prior to showtime, I actually ran the console on this vehicle without battery support. I was at 9 volts. If you look at my screen here, you can see this cute little blue car up here, and I'm showing 13.3 volts. Right. Well, I was at 9 volts when I ran the first time, and I was actually missing controllers. So controllers were not populating. Remember, these cars are smart enough to turn controllers off that are not required for a start. So the first things that we usually see go are navigation, air conditioning. It starts shutting that stuff off.
The stuff that I'm not using while it's
sitting
here.
Well, you don't need to start it, right? So it's just a diagnostics best practice to run the battery support. Another thing that we teach in the class is to run your hazards. So we want you to run the hazards because it keeps the cam line awake in the vehicle. It's also a nice visual indicator for the shop that we are running diagnostics on this car, and please don't forget about us. You know?
I think we may have had a problem with that in the past.
We have, and at Aztec, we've had to beep horns at you and get your attention, and that kind of stuff happens. So the hazards are just a really nice visual indicator in the shop. When you got a hive of activity going on, it's a really nice one to have in place. And you know, another thing that when technicians come to let's talk about the tech for a second.
Sure. Yeah, we can jump to tech.
Technicians may not be body in nature. They may not be mechanical in nature. They might be the gaming type. They might. I've had a couple of young guns come through our class that were very detail oriented, and they knocked out calibration without even thinking twice. And they were very buttoned up on running the scan tool, capturing all of the measurables. You know, in this class, we actually create fake cargo. We put fake baby seats in the car, fake stuff in the trunk, because I want them checking that car in and looking for that stuff. This car's filthy. There's no way I would calibrate this car, right? We didn't have the hazards on because I didn't want to upset the cameras, right? But that's the kind of stuff that when they're prepping the vehicle, we look for that.
Sure.
And so, you know, when you're trying to hire that talent, we'll look for somebody that's detail oriented.
Let's talk about the talent, you know, because this is an area that, again, it's not, you know, it's not a comfort area for most collision technicians. And I think it's a huge opportunity for career and technical school and colleges across the country to grab those digital natives and bring them into the program. And we keep hearing about this technician shortage over and over again, and all we keep doing is regurgitating the same ideas that haven't worked for the last 5 or 10 or 15 years.
We keep shopping on the same aisle at the grocery store, and we've got to try something different.
And there are kids out there that they're still young. There's digital natives out there that like cars, that grew up with a tablet or a cell phone in their hands, that are gamers, that have their own YouTube channel. I mean, they understand this stuff far beyond what I'll ever be capable of, right? And I just think it's a huge opportunity. So if you're looking to do that, if I'm going to build my calibration center in my independent collision repair facility, I need to go out and get talent, because I'm not going to find it under my rooftop, more than likely. Unless I've been really proactive.
There's a big line in the industry right now when it comes to ADAS, which is calibrations are easy. As long as you have someone who knows how to follow instructions, a monkey can do it. And I want to really push back hard on that right now. When it comes to ADAS, in my opinion, it's not about following instructions. The most important thing is being able to research the OEM service information, understand the calibration requirements, and do troubleshooting when it's required. Unfortunately, it's very easy to do a wrong calibration where the tool will say the calibration is passed. That doesn't mean the sensors are working properly. And if you have someone who is mindlessly following instructions, it's highly likely that they're going to miss something. They're going to miss a step in the service manual that isn't included in equipment, especially when we're talking about aftermarket equipment in particular. And so you really need someone, not just an instruction follower or someone who's attentive to detail, but someone who is inquisitive, who wants to do research, always wants to learn more, and is willing to kind of dive into for Nissan, the ESM, to find out what are the steps required, what isn't my tool telling me, what's the service manual saying.
I got probably 5 kids that are in my neighborhood that are teenagers. And I have teenagers, and I bring them, they come over, they see me in the garage tinkering on stuff, and I got the lift and all that. And I said, so you guys want to try this? And they're like, well, I don't know how to use tools or anything like that. I said, no, we're going to. Have you used a computer before? Yeah, man. I'm a gamer. I do this. I do. Yeah, I got one in my pocket. Exactly. And I said, well, great. So yell at that car and tell it to turn on, and it comes on, right? I said, whoa, turn those down. Now I'll turn those down, right? Now turn that off, and then you turn it off, and all of a sudden they're like, that's amazing. How did you do that, right? And how did you turn on only one, or how did you? And all of a sudden you've got them, right? And then you start building upon that, and you start teaching them basic theory. And then when you start having to look at networks and wiring and things like that, then all of a sudden they nerd out on this stuff, and they really gravitate to it. And so, the person that you may grab for calibration may be completely a blank piece of canvas, and that's okay. When we built the class for Nissan, I told them, I said, I refuse to teach this class that I haven't taken as a student. So I want to go through the curriculum that you have for a technician at a dealer to make sure I'm capturing all the points, right? And so, and we had to make some changes because the class that they taught was for 2018 vehicles, and we were teaching on 2020s. And so there was some different tech and some different stuff And so we had to use a combination of the ESM and the vehicles themselves to bring the content up to current, right?
Yeah.
So that's just something that, you may encounter these young folks in all walks of life. They might wait on your table, they might get your TV at Best Buy. They could be anywhere, and you have to be able to gravitate to them and meet them where they're at. You can't just change them overnight, and say, hey, we've got this new process, this new pioneering opportunity within our company,
yep.
and we want to put you in charge of it and give them green grass to run. And that's something that, like I said, it's the sky's the limit as far as that's concerned.
I'm with you 100%. Like I said, I just think it's a huge opportunity to address that technician shortage. This and even the EV conversation we had with iCar yesterday, I think there's an opportunity there. Same kind of background potentially to get them, because we're not going to be the ones dealing with the batteries and the high voltage systems. But I just think there's a huge opportunity, and get them involved in the whole build and design process and doing the research. And,
right.
But yeah, it's probably not going to be somebody that's in your current facility. It's going to be someone from outside, and so they may or may not be
completely
from the
different walk of life, and that's okay. As owners and managers, we have to step back and say, you know what, I'm not sure about this, and so I'm going to bring in a little bit different breed of person, different perspective. They're going to be more like a consumer. They're going to have an expectation on the way something should go. And so that way we can build upon it in our team. You can't have wide receivers blocking linebackers. It's just not going to work out. So making sure you have the right person in the right spot is critical.
Yeah, it's it definitely. Say we had a question that came in. What do you have any recommendations for a good battery maintainer?
Yeah, so there's lots of them out there. You don't want a jump box. You don't want an Amazon battery tender. You don't want something like that.
Tell us why. Why don't I want a
jump
box?
You don't want voltage moving all over the place. You don't want a battery box dying mid-process, right? You can see. I mean, this thing has stayed at 13.4 the entire time. Maintain high voltage, simulating an alternator on without a key on, without an engine on, right? So there's. I'm not going to name products, but I look at it like if it has a flash programmable mode, that's a good step. Okay. There's a couple of different options that offer that. They have a flash programming mode.
Let's add that to our checklist, right? A flash programmable mode on a battery maintainer.
Yeah, if it has a flash programming mode, that's perfect because it stabilizes current.
Where do I find these? Where am I going to buy this?
Yeah, so that there interweb there, you can get, there's a lot of different companies that offer it either through their own online stores. Okay. You might get lucky on an Amazon, but you want to make sure that what you buy has that flash programmable mode. Okay. There's some service manuals that will identify certain tools. The Midtronics GR8 was one that was very popular, but it's expensive. Yep. And they've replaced it with a newer model number now. The GR8 has been discontinued, I believe. Okay. So the GM has a smaller battery maintaining device that they name in their service manual. So once again, as you're making your calibration decisions, and you're going to say, well, we're going to do a ton of GMs, we're going to do a ton of Fords, whatever it might be, then get something that works with those vehicles.
And you can probably get it through your jobber, or even your tool truck, as long as you know that you're purchasing the right equipment.
Yep.
And I'll add something on here. Calibration has become somewhat of a catch-all term for anything you may do to a sensor, whether it's a calibration or an angle check or an operation check or programming. And when it comes to your battery maintainer, what we may call a calibration, if we're replacing a Ford blind spot sensor, that may be not a calibration, but PMI programming.
Yeah.
And so what we may think of as a calibration, it may actually be programming, variant coding, or all sorts of different things that require a stable battery connection, a stable voltage for a prolonged period of time that you will need a battery maintainer for.
Yeah, some controllers won't even accept programming unless the battery voltage is at a certain point.
Sure.
So, and it's a good way to barbecue a car if you're not battery supported. So please do that.
And the other thing is when you're programming, especially if you've got the radio on and the AC on and the lights on, some newer vehicles can really draw a lot of power while you're trying to do programming, and you could very rapidly deplete the battery. If you're talking about a jump pack or just a booster box, it's not a stable connection, so it's kind of pulsing and it's not maintaining that stable connection, and it's not going to keep you up there as the car kind of drains that battery down.
Right.
And maybe I missed it when I was. What could happen if I did use a jumper box?
Well, there was a German manufacturer that I got a call on where it was
hilarious if you heard you say that.
It was a tow-in vehicle, and the damage wasn't really bad. I was wondering why they towed it, and they said the shop had a no start condition, and says, so how many shops do you know research how to jump start a vehicle, right?
None.
Very few, right? So I told the bill payer, I said, you need to ask a very direct question. How did they attempt to start the vehicle? And this particular vehicle was a dual battery vehicle.
Okay.
And the OEM specifically said, do not use jump packs to start our cars. And as a result, they used the jump pack and they fried the fuel DME ECU in the vehicle. So it was a $3,300 ECU that they had to replace. And like I said, and as we move into EVs, when you don't follow these steps, you damage a major component in the vehicle. If you don't use a scan tool to install a radiator, and I know that sounds crazy, you could burn up the inverter in the vehicle, and that can become very expensive. So I think EVs get a justifiable bad rap for hurting the technician, but you can also hurt the vehicle, and people don't realize that is minimal damage, and then because you didn't follow very simple steps, you've hurt the vehicle and damaged an expensive part, and so you don't want to do that.
All right.
So the short answer is you can brick an ECU.
Yes.
And it happens all the time. And if you have a battery maintainer, one nice thing is to get a cloth or something to put over the fender, because you are going to have those cables running down, especially if the car.
I wasn't worried about that fender.
Yeah, this one I think we're okay. The headlight, I don't think we need to worry about.
I think we're good.
I'm surprised that headlight actually worked.
I am too. Yeah.
But especially if its car's just being painted, you don't want to damage the clear coat. So put something over the panel. Don't just drape the wires right over.
That's vehicle protection, another good vehicle protection step.
And just quality of work and taking pride in what you do. I think that's important.
Cool. All right.
Did we miss anything from in-house calibration? I think, people are running to get tools. They're running to hire people, but I don't think they've really defined the process proactively with the staff that they have. Right. They don't predict at the estimatic stage when a calibration is required. Is it a part replacement? Is it just a calibration? Is it one calibration? Is it three? I think today you could start doing those processes to where you're proactively calling your dealer or your mobile and saying, hey, I know it's Monday, but on Thursday we're going to have a front intelligent cruise control calibration that we need done on RO number 1386. And you become very proactive, because as you start doing calibrations in-house, you can't wait till Friday at 5 to do it. You need to know when it's going to be there and what the steps are.
And I think there's two important points. One, going back to your point about starting with one OEM, is the tooling costs are not prohibitive, especially if you're talking about your domestic and Asian makes. If you start with one, it's not a really prohibitive cost. And then number two is the estimating side. Every OEM puts their kind of calibration information in different places. So you may go to someone like Toyota. If you go to the bumper remove and install page, it will say if the bumper cover is damaged or deformed, you have to do a radar aiming procedure. That will not be in either the calibration procedure page, and it won't be on the radar sensor page. You need to look up that procedure for taking the bumper cover on and off. How many shops are doing that? You talk about GM, they have an additional document, that wonderful document. I believe it's also in the service manual. We've got manufacturers with information, in different places potentially. And so if you kind of jump into it and you don't train your estimators, they're going to miss a ton of stuff. And so there's a real great case for starting with one make, working with your estimators to catch it up front, and then your technicians to kind of also understand, how do I calibrate this vehicle? What are the prerequisites? Do I need a level floor? Do I need full tire pressure, full tank of gas? And kind of having that flow work, and then moving to other manufacturers as well.
Well, I think that's another thing to add to our checklist is we need some new SOPs. We're going to need to develop and monitor and adjust our SOPs for how we're taking the vehicle and how we're identifying the ADAS. When do I do the calibration? That's a whole other set of SOPs that I need to develop for my
Before
shop.
you buy, go audit what's being done now.
Right.
Before you go buy something and you go to a Nissan dealer, a Toyota dealer, a Honda dealer, whatever it is, go audit what they are doing. And make sure you're capturing that 1, 2, 3 process. The photo of the procedure, the photo of what the procedure says, and then the completed calibration, right? And showing the screen that showed that it completed. The health check needs to be in there, the fuel receipts, all that kind of stuff. And if your third party is not running that workflow, they're not setting targets up, they're not measuring stuff, you need to find another third party. And so you've got to get that auditing piece done, because you're never going to be able to calibrate every make, every model. And so you need to have a workflow that works across multiple brands. And then when you start bringing in some of that stuff in-house, you apply that workflow against your own people. So.
And the UK's done a great job. They have insurance industry regulations for ADAS, and it simply says when the car comes in, document what ADAS is on the vehicle, what are the features on the car, document that you did the research to find out what needs to be calibrated, using OEM service information, by the way. When you've done the calibrations, you've actually document that you've pulled that OEM service information and that you've completed the calibration according to that OEM guidelines.
Right.
So it kind of covers you from when the car gets in, identifying what's on the car, to researching, to performing the calibration. And I think every shop can really benefit from this. When the car comes in, find out what's on the car, find out what needs to be calibrated, and then find out how to do the calibration. Or, as Jake said, if you are going to be subletting it out, what do I need to look for? Is the car coming back with a full tank of gas, right? Did they perform a wheel alignment before the calibration, if that's something that needs to be done? And did they reset the steering angle sensor?
Is there test
if
drive?
That was something that had to be done
in
as
and
well.
out mileage, start looking for these things,
Now, you mentioned the UK. Can I access that standard? Is that through BSI? Is that where that?
It is through Thatcham.
It's through
And
Thatcham,
so they've actually posted all of those guidelines and
so
what
is that
they're
something I
looking
could
for.
use as a technician here or a shop owner in North America? Could I have access to that?
You can have access to it. It's publicly posted what those guidelines are.
So it's a good place to start again from, if I'm going to develop my own kind of SOPs, there's some that already kind of exist potentially. I know iCar's got some best practices as well around scanning and calibration. They could use as well to kind of, again, and modify it for my shop, but it's a great place to start rather than starting with
Jason,
nothing.
I think the shop, we've covered a lot of static stuff. We haven't really talked about dynamic too much. Dynamic's a good one to start off in is maybe your first OEM. Right? But you still need to have a buttoned up process for capturing the drive cycle. And as far as the conditions that need to be met, you also need to talk to your owner proactively at drop off where your test track is, where you're going to drive that vehicle to meet, where you're going to meet the requirement the OE set, right? So if it's a maneuver, it's forward and reverse, it's a speed. A lot of the new semi-autonomous vehicles have a geo-fenced highway that you must put the vehicle on a geo-fenced highway for it to work. So Cadillac's Super Cruise, for instance, and ProPilot 2.0 from Nissan will be geo-fenced. So you can't just do the test drive down your street and call it good. You need to get on an approved highway. And so what I've found that works with the shops is actually print a map of where your shop is and put a star. Customers are used to seeing that. You are here, okay, at the mall. You are here, right? Our test track involves, and we're in Arkansas, involves Highway 30. We're gonna get out on Highway 30. We're running 2.6 miles this way. We're getting off at this exit. You won't catch us at McDonald's. You're gonna catch us on a back road. We're gonna hit a stop sign. We're gonna make a couple of maneuvers. This road is well marked. We need to see lane. And all of a sudden customers are looking at you like, wow, that is really detailed. And do your collision repair the same way. Be as detailed with that. You'll also find that bill payers will pay you for a test drive that is clearly identified. Why, how long, what system, all that kind of stuff. If it's just tire pressure monitoring, the mile per hour is this. We have to make 3 turns for more than a minute. We only have to run this portion of the track, and it's cost X. So if you're very detailed about the system, then all of a sudden your reimbursement becomes a little easier. And so print that out, have it in your office, cover that at drop-off, make sure a customer's okay with you driving their car, and so you can start picking up those dynamic recals.
I think setting the expectation of here's what's going to happen.
You could have less fuel, you could have mileage on the vehicle that wasn't there.
You better have mileage.
You better have mileage, and that's an easier discussion at drop-off than when you're picking it up.
To say it, the Polish repair, go like, wait, you put 40 miles on my car?
So you were hot rodding my car?
Right.
One of the, I won't say it's an issue I have with test drives. I will say Nissan is a leader in terms of they have an action test for all of their features. If you've done a calibration, you mentioned the blind spot, but it's really all of them. If you've done a calibration, do an action test and look for these certain things. I think what we're going to run into is as OEMs keep adding features onto the car, it's just going to be impossible to test every single feature for every single system on a test drive. When you're talking about things like blind spot or radar, they're meant to make a split-second decision at certain millisecond intervals based on the speed and velocity of the car, which is really not something you can do as a human being You can't say, this worked at 200 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds. I think it's necessary, but not sufficient. When you look at the new Ford F-150, they actually have a special blind spot sensor for if you have a trailer.
Yeah.
So it actually looks farther down and past the trailer. So if you've done programming and you want to make sure that blind spot sensor works, you're going to hook a trailer up to the back of that F-150. You have to do something, and you do have to do a test drive to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
Check those features. But it's going to be very difficult to say, with true certainty that that's working.
Well, that drives home why we're not trying to be any and all. You need to focus on one brand at a time. Get really good at that one, right? And making sure that you're hitting all the marks that an OE wants you to hit, that you use the correct tooling, and that ultimately your customer is satisfied and their vehicle is working as designed. Because like I said, these digital natives, these folks that are buying cars nowadays, they have connectivity to their car with a mobile app, and they can check up on you. I mean, I can tell you with my Nissan, I can tell you where that truck is at any given time. I know if it's in motion after a curfew that I've set. I mean, they are going to hold us to an unbelievable standard. And with EVs, more voltage means more stuff, more features, more connectivity. And so it's only going to get harder. And so, start developing those best practices now.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. So,
did we have any questions?
Yeah, we got, let's see here. Why is it scan tools have been in mechanical shops for years, and now it has to be OE?
Okay, so let's talk about, we touched a little bit on that.
Yep.
So on the mechanical side, it's focused on a concern. Customer states the check engine light is on. Customer states the vehicle pulls. Customer states that the vehicle vibrates. Customer states that her power windows no longer work. I got one when I was at Mercedes. Customer states she hears a dinner bell when she goes over a speed bump. I kid you not, that is what the RO said. So that's why you see the lines in mechanical or a la carte. They have customer state lines and diagnostic checkout fees for each line, right? So in mechanical, when you know what the concern is, as long as your tool has full access to the controller, you could put an OE tool and have the same capability. Yeah. You could do active tests, you could see data streams, you could clear and erase codes, you could program with J2534. You know what the concern is, and as long as your tool corrected the concern, then you would not see a difference. In collision, there are no two collisions alike. Yeah. We have to confirm the build data on this car. We have to know what controllers were equipped on this car. Because the vehicles hit a object or hit another vehicle, right?
It doesn't just say vehicles involved in a collision.
It doesn't say customer states vehicle involved in a collision. So we need to see everything on the vehicle. So another thing that we see in mechanical is you don't upsell warranty, right? So it's a known warranty issue.
Yep.
We don't upsell that. We wait till a customer complains about it.
Yeah.
So that's something that, unless it's a safety recall, that's a different story, right? But in the mechanical space, it's just a completely different business model.
And here's the thing. We talked about FCA or Stellantis putting the gateway module, and we've seen it now with Nissan as well. I think we need to kind of put that within a broader trend. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see more OEMs putting gateway modules. Yeah. And even if there's a right to repair and authorizations, there's a lag time. And even now we're seeing, when you get to talk about Hyundai, Kia and the blind spot sensors, you need to make sure that certain serial numbers match and do an update. That may not, there's a lot of functions when it comes to ADAS that can't even be done with a J2534 tool that are not so-called right to repair compliant.
Yeah, not all OEs are
compliant.
J2534 friendly,
That's correct.
And it's another thing you'll see with mechanics that's rare is where they don't have just one aftermarket tool. Yeah. Mechanics typically have a variety of tools.
I'll use this tool for this.
I'll use this one for this one, and this one's stronger on European, and this one's better on Asian, and yada, yada, yada.
We don't know that
and we don't know that. And so in reality, I can remember our first meeting at the NACE show floor, and we did a blueprinting class, and it was like, why do we need to scan this car? Yeah. And then we find that the tire pressure monitoring sensor was completely toast and was missed, and it's like, guys, that's why we got to do this, because things have changed. Yeah. So another person made a comment about battery connecting to an auxiliary port. I'm not a big fan of that. I know there's a lot of battery load sensors and things on the vehicles. I like to access directly to the battery and battery support from there. It's not that we're not jump starting a vehicle, we're maintaining voltage in a vehicle. So I don't want to lose part of the network, some of the network, part of a controller. I don't want that to happen. So I always battery support directly to the vehicle, to the battery in the vehicle. And that means if you got to pull seats, if you got to pull, trunk, that is what it is, so.
Back to the scan tool question real briefly. What's the lag time between when the vehicle first hits the road to when it's in the OE scan tool?
Yep.
Is there a lag time there?
So we do see some lag time in capability.
Okay.
There was one OEM that we were working with that put a new calibration step on their vehicle that went from static to dynamic.
Okay.
And the OE software would not calibrate the vehicle. Okay. Could not get it to complete. It would crash. Okay. So even directly connected, nothing in between, completing the road test like you're instructed, they had an issue. And so you remember when that vehicle leaves manufacturing, an OE's only chance to tap it on the shoulder again is through a scan tool or through an over-the-air update, right? And so in our case, they had to push 3 OEM scan tool updates to that tool before it would complete the calibration process. So sometimes it's buggy, sometimes that happens.
But what kind of length are we talking? Like how long is that lag
Once
time?
they put out Volkswagen has a thing called a hot fix, and so when they have a problem with their module, there's a bug, they can push software quickly. They can literally correct the firmware and push it to the OE tools very quickly.
Immediately.
Yeah,
okay.
Immediately.
So now that we know that, let's say this new vehicle just got released today. Is the first day it's available on the market.
Yep.
How many warranty claims am I going to have on that?
Well, it could happen, and that's why they move. That's why they move quickly. Yeah.
But how frequently? Not very often, right?
Not very often.
Versus when I pull that thing out of the dealership lot, what's going to happen?
Yep.
Day one, right?
That's what happens. We see the newest cars in the worst shape.
Right.
So it's and like I said, when we talked about the numbers of 21 models last time I was on the show, and how quickly they enter the space, and we're only dealing with 4,000 shops.
Right.
So we're seeing those cars literally jump by hundreds of vehicles on a month-to-month basis, and so they get into the marketplace very quickly.
Yeah, I guess my point is it's just the lag time from an OE tool to an aftermarket tool.
Yep.
There could be a variance there because it just takes time to get that all update over time, and it's
especially
it's
every trim level, every feature on one platform.
Yeah.
So it's really tough. So
what didn't we cover? We got our shop, we got our floor. I think we've talked about targets to death. We're probably pretty good there. Everybody knows that they need the proper tools, the proper targets. Training. Let's talk a little bit more about training to kind of close the show. So we've got our digital native that we just hired. He or she has this brand new shop with a nice floor that you guys helped design with the paint companies.
Yep.
And we're going to do our Nissan and talk a little bit about what Nissan offers via Aztec, and then just hit on what other training is out there that as a collision repair technician I might be able to access.
Yeah, I know that there's iCar has some programs as well that they're working with on advanced driver assist and stuff like that. Some of it vehicle specific.
So does Collision Hub, by the way.
So does Collision Hub. That's vehicle specific because you're starting to get really specific when you start talking about features and things like that. But I can tell you for the Nissan class, we don't even allow you to attend the class until you have about 3 hours of pre-work that you have to finish.
Okay.
I can't spend class time teaching you how to navigate tech info. And if you don't know what tech info is, there's an opportunity. Don't even come because it's going to be a waste of your time and you're not going to pass. It is a pass or fail class. And so we want you to understand the service manual inside and out. If I ask you to go and find, intelligent cruise control, what are the steps and how do you prep the car, I need you to get there quickly, and I need you to understand how consult works on a basic, from a basic perspective,
so
how to run it.
It's a blended learning program, so there's some homework before I get
there's homework,
there, and then we do some hands-on.
the whole bit. And then we get to the hands-on piece. And like I said, in the class, we've simulated real things that you will see on a collision damaged vehicle that has been repaired by somebody, and maybe not repaired very well. And so we've simulated a couple of booby traps for you where you actually have to apply a repair to that car and then perform the calibration. And so it's not just read and clear diagnostics. There's none of that kind of stuff. These fault codes won't go away.
Right.
So you actually have to perform the steps. And then we grade you on the setup. And we don't just throw you to fire and you have to learn. The first day, we hold your hand through things, we walk through things, we answer questions. But second day, it's testing time. We want to see where you're at. And we're going to throw a blend of 4 different models at you. You have to do 3 calibrations. And we've got some secure gateway vehicles and some non-secure gateway vehicles. So we've got a little bit of everything. We also have Nissan launched a world's first system on the new Infinity that has fly-by-wire steering. So it has 3 control unit and redundant fly-by-wire steering, 3 calibrations required if you do an alignment. So, like I said, it's just not getting easier, but it's good for us. I'd rather them see that in a learning environment than having to try to figure that out when the car is on your doorstep.
And it's a continuous learning process. I mean, manufacturers are always updating their service information. When it comes to ADAS, it's a constantly changing space. Right? We saw Honda just recently revised their guidance, their aiming driving support systems document. That was in March. Big overhaul on that side. So you always have to stay on top of things. And there's certainly not, Aztec, I think, sets the technicians up for success. And then you need to stay on top of it afterwards.
Well, there's been a couple of cases where we've found some things in the manual that didn't necessarily line up with how the car was working. And we were like, hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And they have to engage the service manual team and the engineering team and the diagnostic team and the collision team. And everybody has to put their heads together. And we take a lot of photos to show you what we did and did we make a mistake. And they realize that they have a mistake in the service manual or in the scan tool and they make immediate correction. And so, we didn't really talk about modification, but have your eyes open on modification. There's a lot of direction in the in the owner's manual about modifying vehicles. Be very careful of that because that can be a variable that can bite you and you may be stuck with a car that you can't calibrate. And, I don't know how many owners keep their stock tires and their stock shocks and all that kind of stuff. And you just don't want to go down that road. I think lead those cars to the person that modified that vehicle, So be careful with that.
You mentioned, you have to be continually evolving and learning, and it goes back with that humility conversation that we had earlier. I think we've got to recognize that it's not a one and done, and we gotta. When you're green, you grow. When you're right, you rot.
That's right.
And we always got to be growing. We always got to be learning and moving that forward. So I think again, having that humility to say, you know what, I don't know everything, and it's not just ADAS. I mean, it's everything, right? I mean, we still see too many technicians that we're going to talk about in a couple hours. I mean, there's a post last night about something that I'm going to share this afternoon about that other than aluminum and ADAS, the vehicle hasn't changed in the last 15 years. I don't know. It's beyond me how people are still thinking that way. But again, that's where that lack of humility and learning, that willingness to continue to evolve.
Yeah, this isn't a pride thing, man. I look at it. We're all learning this, and please don't feel like you're by yourself. You can reach out to Pick-a-Tech. There's a lot of features a lot of resources out there that you can ask a question before you fix a car. And like I said, I always try to help where I can on that. It's like, listen, if I don't know where to find that info, I probably know somebody who knows. And so I'll help you get there. And we certainly try to do that. So
I mean, I lean on you a lot. I lean on Nick. I lean on a lot of others in the industry because they come to Collision Hub through Pick-a-Tech or would ask us questions. We don't know everything.
If you see me do a live video on Facebook, that's something that whipped me. That's something that just punched me in the head, and I'm like, God.
And when I get
man, they got to see this.
And when I get a call from Jake, a video call from Jake, ooh, I bet you he's got something.
Let's go to the tape.
Here,
Exactly.
I think when it comes to the service manual and estimating and researching, and especially ADAS, the starting point really has to be, I know nothing. Even if I knew something a week ago, I know one, there's an old Greek philosopher said, I know one more thing than you, which is I know nothing. And that really has to be your approach when it comes to ADAS and the service manual. ADAS isn't the same within one make. It may differ between brands, and it may differ between years. OEMs may change up sensors between model years, between models. And so you can't say, well, I know Nissan requires this because it has a front radar sensor. That is wrong. You need to go and look everything up and really start from a point of humility and say, I don't know anything. Let me find out.
I tell the shops, go look up how to disconnect a battery. Research that you don't know it.
Mind blowing.
And then all of a sudden they're like, holy smokes, pull a bumper cover. We do bumper jobs all day, every week. I mean, you just did one on the previous show, right? So we need to research those, look those up.
Well, Jake, Nissan doesn't require you to do anything after you disconnect a battery, right?
How long a list you want, man? I mean, and it changes by platform. So, and one thing that will help you with bill payers, Toyota's TIS actually gives you the necessary procedure and the consequence if you don't do it, which is nice. I wish more OEMs did that. What you want me to do and what happens if I don't do it, right? Well, and it gives you and just use your favorite color highlighter, okay? And show them if I have to do this, if I don't do it, these systems won't work. And that jumps off the page. It brings a lot of clarity. And so use that as examples,
pounds. And it go, kind of what you're saying about start with like that nothing, right? I think that's another advantage of bringing in that digital native that hasn't been doing this for 30 years. They don't come with 30 years of bad habits. They come in with that humility because they are green.
The next thing they'll say is, well, I don't have the time. And we always have the time when it's wrong. We'll stay late, we'll come in on Saturdays, right? We'll buy rental cars. We'll throw all kinds of revenue and money at it to fix the fire when we didn't spend the time in the beginning.
We never have time to do it right the first time, but we always have time to do it the second time.
Yeah, well, this right here is $1,000 in severity right here.
Yeah.
So if you miss that on a borderline total loss, that's the difference of a car being repaired and not repaired.
And since you did it with a hammer, you owe
us $1,000. Yeah, now it's really hurting. So
awesome.
Well, cool.
Guys, appreciate it. Any more questions coming in, Chris? Are we good on questions?
We good?
All right, cool.
All right, good deal.
Well, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. Some great stuff as always. And we'll be back at 6 o'clock, and we're going to be talking about the World Wide Web and some of the things that we've happened upon over the past couple of months. So it should be an entertaining show, especially since we got a few hours of prep for it now at the
I love it.
Down the street, and we'll be good to go. So
how much you learned from the internet is what you're saying.
Exactly. Exactly. That's my research for the day. You go on the internet. So we'll see you back here at 6 o'clock.